Receiving incoming transmission.
Incoming transmission.
Incoming transmission.
I'm sure you have many questions.
Transmission.
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 Welcome to Transmission, a monthly show about the most impactful posts from our Meteor.js forums. My name is Paul Dowman, founder at OKGrow, and each month I am joined by Sashko, Stubailo and other guests from the Meteor development group. Please note the contents of this show are the sole opinions of their authors. This show is sponsored by Meteor Galaxy Hosting, a containerized cloud service specifically designed and engineered for Meteor app deployment. Learn more at meteor.com/galaxy. This show is also sponsored by OKGrow, an official Meteor Prime consulting partner building full-stack web and mobile apps. Learn more at okgrow.com. Welcome to Transmission number 20. I'm Paul Dowman. I'm the founder of OKGrow, where we help clients build great apps with Meteor, and I'm joined by Sashko Stubailo of the Meteor development group. Hey, Sashko.
Hey, Paul. Good to see you again.
Thanks for doing this again. So we had some scheduling issues with you being away at ReactConf and then me being on vacation. So sorry for taking so long to get around to this one, but we're back.
Yeah, and it couldn't be at a better time with the Meteor 1.5 release being literally yesterday.
Yeah, that is actually perfect timing. So let's talk about that. I'm really happy about that. That one's been a long time in the making. So, and you guys have, by the way, kudos for being really clear and public about the development of that and what was happening. So that's cool. So people have been able to follow that for a while. And the most exciting thing about it is code splitting, or also known as dynamic imports.
So one interesting thing to mention here is, if you look at the history file, which is kind of like the changelog of Meteor in the repository, you'll see that the Meteor 1.5 section is actually quite short. And that's because one thing we've been really diligent about is because we've been preparing this major feature of dynamic imports, but we don't want people to have to wait until that's done to get all the other improvements that are in the works from contributors. So in a funny twist, Meteor 1.5 itself is not very much more than just that one particular feature. But if you want to think about the progress of the framework as a whole, it's kind of like, what are all the things that have happened since 1.4 to 1.5? And that is like an incredible amount of stuff, right? Like, releases like 1441, 1442, 1443 are intentionally really incremental, so that when 1.5 comes out, it's just one major thing that's changing.
Yeah, and it's a big thing, really. Like it's core infrastructure stuff, and I think maybe if you want to explain what exactly how you guys have not exactly, but if you could explain roughly how it's been implemented, that'd be cool. For example, exact code splitting, what that is, versus bundling.
Yeah, so right now there's a couple of different entries in the whole bundling community, if you will. Probably the top things people are using are Browserify, kind of the old school choice, probably one of the first to do this kind of bundling. And then there's Webpack and Rollup are two very popular options. And for people who don't know, the primary role of these tools is to take a bunch of files that have, in today's world, imports and exports that tie those files together and convert that into usually just one file, which is a JavaScript file that the browser knows how to execute. Because there's some stuff coming up these days about browsers maybe implementing support for modules. As you may know, historically JavaScript pretty much deals only in global variables, so you have to kind of fake your way to a nice module system. And they've been talking about browsers implementing that. But unfortunately, a browser is never going to be able to do all of the stuff that a bundling tool can do, like Meteor, because the only way to have efficient bundling is to analyze all the code upfront, right? If you had a code base where you loaded index.js, and then index.js loaded like app.js, and then app.js loaded like mycomponent.js, you would have this crazy waterfall of requests. So you really need a bundling tool to make sure that you're efficiently delivering the code at the right time to the client. Okay, that's maybe too much background, but you know, a lot of these tools historically have focused on creating one bundle because there's a lot of benefits to having one JavaScript file have your whole application inside of it. And the most important benefit is for people who are coming back to your application after already having visited it, they can retrieve that entire thing directly from the cache. However, there are really big drawbacks specifically in two things. One is upfront loading time. So the first time you go to an app, you have to download that entire file. And the second thing is actually maybe even worse is the JavaScript parsing and execution time. So your browser has to consume that entire JavaScript bundle and understand all of it before it can do anything.
Yep.
So then people were like, well, what if we don't load the entire bundle up front? And so the current thing that people will do, and Webpack in particular prides itself on having this as a feature, is splitting up into multiple bundles. And generally when you have multiple bundles, what that means is you draw a fence around some parts of your code and you say, don't put that into the main bundle, only load this when I ask for one of the modules that are in there. So, you know, one nice thing to do might be to, for example, move your admin panel or some part of your app that's not frequently used, make that not loaded up front so people don't have to pay that cost. So bringing us to Meteor, Meteor has until Meteor 1.5, in Meteor 1.4 and below, you get one giant JavaScript file when you bundle your app for production. But that's not going to be the case anymore. Now you do get a single JavaScript file for your initial bundle, but all of the other modules are loaded through a totally different mechanism. They're actually loaded with a custom caching mechanism over a WebSocket. And the really interesting thing about the difference between the Meteor approach to this problem and Webpack, for example, is that Meteor's solution involves the client side of the app knowing about the entire module tree ahead of time. So why is that good? Well, that means that, like, let's say you import a module on the client, and you know, you want to know what needs to be loaded for that module to work, right? Because that module has its own dependencies, etc. So in Meteor, I think it's the only system today that has this property that the client knows exactly what modules it has and which ones it doesn't have in order to make that new thing you've imported run. And what that means is it will never load the same code twice. So you can be a lot more cavalier about having a lot more dynamic imports everywhere, because in systems like Webpack, you have a finite number of possible bundles. You need to be kind of aware about like how those things are grouped together. But our hope is that with Meteor, you don't have to worry about that at all. You can just put dynamic imports wherever it makes sense, wherever you can absorb the cost of doing one more round trip to the server to fetch that code. But you don't have to worry about grouping that together into some set of bundles. You know, similarly to how when you request the data in your app, you just request whatever data you need at the time. You don't worry about like making data bundles or something like that. We think that code loading should work the same way. Your server and your client should collaborate to make sure the code shows up at the right time without you having to like plan upfront what data is going to need to be present there.
Yep. And it comes over a WebSocket, so you have a less expensive round trip for when you do, as compared for when you do make that dynamic import call, as compared with HTTP.
Yes.
And I think that, like, a lot of times when you look into this stuff, you'll read about HTTP2, where there can potentially be server push in a persistent HTTP connection, which has a slightly lower, probably a lot lower cost than single HTTP. But this has, I would assume this would have pretty much the same benefits.
Yeah, so there's
they're
two
not
things.
going to be pushed by the server, of course.
Yeah, the biggest benefit I think in what Meteor is doing is that it's actually going to work in all browsers and all server environments, because pretty much everywhere supports WebSockets now. And that's in contrast to approaches like HTTP2, which isn't going to work with every server, and the service worker thing that people are really excited about, which isn't going to work in every browser. And like most importantly, my favorite example to bring up is that if you're following the progressive web app model and you're using service workers to cache your modules or whatever, that's not going to work in mobile Safari or actually any Safari.
Yep.
So if you care about people using iPhones, Meteor has a solution that's going to work to actually cache your modules on the client, even in that browser.
Yep. That's cool.
So yeah, and I guess just to dive into the caching thing for a second, basically what that means is because we have every module individually instead of these bundles, you can on the client look up those bundles from the client side cache individually and pull them out. And so you only have to load each module exactly once. So even if you've published a new version of your application, if you haven't changed the version of React, for example, in that application, it will actually reuse the old one it had because it knows it's the same.
That's awesome. Yep. And so the other thing with exact code splitting versus bundling is I understand in Webpack you might get bundles that overlap based on the dependencies of modules. So if you've got, I don't know, Lodash or something that's, as an example, that's being required as a dependency from multiple different bundles, it'll probably be if it's a dependency of multiple packages that are each in different bundles, you'll still have Lodash, for example, in both of those bundles.
That's right. And the suggested solution there is to use, I think there's two options.
The common.
I really need to. There's the common chunks plugin. Then there's like the ability to create a vendor bundle as well. So there are some solutions, but you will still end up with some duplication, regardless. Yeah.
So I think this is looks like a really elegant solution. And when you upgrade to 1.5, is there anything special you need to do?
So actually, it was funny. Somebody was like, you should write a tutorial to upgrade from Meteor 1.4 to 1.5, but there's no tutorial because you don't have to do anything at all. Yeah. So, to be fair, you're not going to get a whole ton of benefits from upgrading. If you don't do anything, I mean, your app will work more or less the same way it did before. Although I think we've done a little bit of work to reduce some of the dependencies in the core, and we're going to keep doing that. But the next thing you want to do after you upgrade is you want to open the new bundle visualizer package. So this is a package you can add to your application, which will give you a nice chart of what in your app is taking up the most space. And so you probably want to add that, see what's taking up the space in your app, and see if you can convert that thing into a dynamic import, right? So maybe that's like a PDF viewer, library, and maybe you're only viewing PDFs on like one page of your app. Mm-hmm. So try converting that to a dynamic import and see if that reduces your bundle size, and that'll make your app load faster.
Yeah, and then you have to remove that before deploying to production because it can't be a dev only package, right? Because it has to be running in production mode. So that's just one little quirk.
Yeah, this was an interesting thing where I think this was kind of my fault in some sense, because we were like sitting down, we were like trying to come up with all these clever solutions for like, how are we going to have this package which like shows up in production but doesn't show up in production because we want to measure the minified file sizes. And then I said it was definitely my fault. I was like, what if we just ask people to remove the package manually before deploying? And it's
I don't think it's something you want to leave in your app anyway. I mean, it's I don't think that's a problem. All right.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, this is awesome. I'm pretty excited about this.
Yeah, I think we've gotten this stuff in there, which I think is super important. I think the next step is making it so that more and more people can take advantage of this technology, right? Because I think this kind of module loading is something that everyone in the JavaScript community can take advantage of, and making it so that more and more people can feel like they want a better module loading solution, and this is something that's accessible to them, is definitely at the top of my mind.
Yep. Yeah, I think this is kind of like back to that question of what's Meteor in 2017 for people that didn't come from the from previous Meteor versions, right? This is a really compelling reason to use Meteor for anybody in JavaScript. So
Yeah, definitely. One of the things I thought was interesting is, I've also, most of the projects I work on are using Meteor for the bundling, but there's also some applications like example apps that I'm building with Create React App. And one of the things we haven't done a good job of illuminating is like, what's the difference there, right? So Create React App is this great tool you can use. It has like also very easy module bundling, whatever. But there are some distinct advantages. Like for example, I believe like Meteor 1.5 is the only thing that gives you like zero configuration code splitting, where you can actually set your own Babel RC file, for example. So you want to use a custom Babel plugin, you can't actually do that in Create React App. And I think you can kind of do it in Next.js, but not very well. It's the only thing that will give you a server alongside your thing. So if you want to do server-side rendering with Create React App, that's not something you can currently do. Or even use compile less files into your application, if you're not using CSS and JS. They're basically, I think Meteor is really coming to its own as a module bundling solution, which is actually, ironically, less opinionated than the main other things people are using out there that give you this low configuration approach. So I think falling into the niche of having very little configuration, but still being super flexible is something that I think we can be on top of with just very small changes from where we are today.
Yeah. I just thought of a question for you as well. Does this work with the dynamic import? Does that work with Meteor Client Bundler? So, for example, if you're using React Native or something other than a web client?
No, so it's kind of the opposite of Meteor Client Bundler in some sense, where Meteor Client Bundler is something if you would like to use. So Meteor is kind of two things, right? It's a build system, and then it's a bunch of runtime components. The build system is something that we hope to make it possible to use without the runtime components. So you can use the Meteor build tool, which I think is really great, actually. And you can use that without MongoDB, and you can use that maybe even without DDP and without the account system and whatever. Meteor Client Bundler is kind of the opposite, which is like, okay, so you want DDP and you want some data loading and you want MongoDB, but you don't want the build tool because you're using React Native for the build tool, for example. So I think in some sense, you can see that as the beginning of some kind of decoupling there, where one is like, basically because
if it's web, if it's web, you're giving up you're saying like I'm probably going to use Webpack, or maybe it's going in a React Native app where it doesn't even make sense. You would not want to dynamically import things anyway. So.
Right, exactly. So I'm hoping that people will be able to use just the parts of Meteor that are compelling to them. Because one consistent thing that we run into is that everyone likes different parts, and they have different reasons for picking Meteor as their platform of choice.
Yep. Cool. Very exciting. So, and just like right after 1.5, you're already talking about 1.6. I don't know where I saw this. I think it was a forum thread, but the plan is for 1.6 to be the Node 6 update, right?
Yeah. It's really nice that both 1.6 and Node 6 end with the same number. But also, I think there's some murmurings that maybe it should be Node 8 instead, because that just came out. The main thing there is, one of the big bets that Meteor made back in the day was using this fiber thing, which is kind of a way to get asynchronous behavior in Node, but without using callbacks. And that's one of the conflicts with moving to higher versions of Node, because versions of Node past Node 4 have more sophisticated support for promises and async await. And we need to figure out how to either make those things live together nicely or figure out how to move off of fibers onto that new system. Mm-hmm. So we've already figured out the problem of binary dependencies, which is how we were able to move to Node 4 in the first place. So I think that's the main question of how can we transition to Node 6 or Node 8. And I think the biggest benefit for people, some people are saying there's not that much benefit. As a Meteor developer, why do you care? And I think the biggest thing is actually going to be performance. If you write a very simple server and you write that in Node 4 and you write the same exact code in Node 6, the Node 6 one is pretty significantly faster.
Cool. Is that because it uses a more recent Chrome? I'm blanking on the name
V8.
of the engine. V8, thank you. Is it because it uses a more recent V8?
I believe so, yeah, because Node is really just, as far as I understand, V8 with some additional native bindings and APIs. So I imagine most performance benefits come from V8 improvements. But basically, I just remember somebody was posting on the forum, and they were like, why is it that when I implement the same app with regular Node and with Meteor, why is the Meteor one slower? And the answer was pretty much because they were using a newer version of Node in that other app. But if you put both of them on Node 4, it's the same exact performance.
Cool. By the way, I wanted to make one more comment about Meteor 1.5. I would recommend for anyone to read that blog post because it was a really cool post, a little bit of history and stuff in there. So go to blog.meteor.com and read the 1.5 post. Puts a little context around this update.
Yeah, I mean, whenever I feel like I get to, read something written by Ben Newman, that's like a present.
Yeah.
Because that guy's got so much insight into all this stuff. He's like, when we were doing code splitting in 2006.
Back in 2006.
Yeah. So that's great. And I think, just to transition a little bit, like the thing that I really want to call out to people about is that, I think people can see that we've been working really hard to make Meteor a more sophisticated tool, much faster, much better, better for larger apps, while still being easy to start with, making sure we maintain all the backwards compatibility so people can upgrade. The thing that we haven't been able to have as much time for because we've been focusing so much on that and enabling contributors and handling issues is promoting it. So if you're wondering what's the best thing I can do to help out with Meteor, the number one thing you can do is talk about it. If you've had a great experience, like for example, if you've had a Meteor app, since Meteor 1.0 and you've had a great time upgrading through the years, that's a great story that I think a lot of people in JavaScript will sympathize with because it's not always easy to upgrade to new versions of your JavaScript tools across months or let alone years. Or for example, if you upgraded your application and you found that you could reduce your bundle size really significantly and that it was pretty easy, like people telling those stories would be like the number one biggest benefit for the project. And on our side, that'll give us more motivation to do more great work to help people out even more. So I think that would be a great collaboration there.
Yep. Totally. Cool. All right. Well, that's Meteor 1.5. Moving on to the other popular threads that have been on the forums. The Meteor is great. Why not more popular thread? Anything to say on that? I think that's kind of maybe what you were alluding to.
Yeah.
There.
So I was a little bit referring to that, but yeah, basically, this thread was really, really neat. Because looking at it, it was really cool that, people had all these great stories to share in this thread that they've had a great experience with Meteor. Why don't other people understand that I had this great experience? And it's getting better over time. And even people who are discovering Meteor today, I think a lot of times when we have these conversations, it's in the context of people who have been using it for years now, because that's when it was the most hyped.
Yep.
But there are people who are discovering it today and thinking, wow, like this is a great way to build an application. So I think basically that's kind of what I was alluding to, yeah, which is, we've been putting in all this technical work and we need a lot more work to help with the positioning and the very small adjustments to the messaging. Even if people have ideas for how we can better do the tutorials or change the docs a little bit so it's more welcoming. That's something that doesn't take a lot of time, compared to contributing to the code, but has like incredible value.
One thing I really liked in this thread was the post where somebody shared the Gartner hype cycle graph chart thing. Peak of inflated expectations, and then trough of disillusionment, slope of enlightenment back up to the plateau of productivity, which is where a lot of people are right now. And so, and those are the people that are just quietly getting stuff done.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I think, we didn't do ourselves any favors by, I think, raising the peak of inflated expectations even higher than it otherwise would have been. Just because I think people here at Meteor really like to set high expectations for what we're doing, and I think often we do meet them, but it's not always possible, to create the like super ultra perfect thing that will do everything for you and cook you dinner and monetize your application for you. So while I think we've done some great stuff, I think it hasn't always measured up to our own, lofty goals. So.
Well, there's a lot of good stuff in this thread, and there's a lot of happy people there too.
Yeah, definitely. That's a thread to read through to get, I think, like a pretty nice, I think a really level-headed analysis of like, okay, like what are the real problems here? What are the real benefits here? Like, how has the community evolved in the last year or two? So yeah, definitely one to check out.
Cool. All right. And another popular thread was talking about reval. So this is from the Qualia people. Yeah. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. I mean, I was first introduced to this this tool by Lucas Hansen from Qualia. We had a Meteor meetup recently here in San Francisco about a month ago, maybe less than a month ago. I'm not sure. Time is weird. And it's super incredible. Basically, it's like super powerful hot module reloading for Blaze. And I think one of the things that's cool about it is, if you guys haven't checked it out, there's a sweet demo video where you just you're in your app, you open up this little panel, you can edit something super fast, and it shows up literally instantly. And the way it does that is by replacing templates in Blaze like at runtime and re-rendering that stuff automatically. And I think it's a cool look into the benefits of what you can do with a templating language that is much harder to do with a system like React, for example, where the framework doesn't have as much control over what's going on. Like with React hot module reload, you often have to put in a good amount of work to get that module reloading to work properly, because inside a React component, you can have any kind of JavaScript code you want. But I think this package really demonstrates how when the framework hides a little bit of that stuff under the hood, you can do like super magical things. So this kind of made me want to like switch back to Blaze for my projects or something. But I hope that they can, I think Vue.js might have some similar types of properties. So maybe it would be possible to implement for Vue.js or maybe even React. And that would be like pretty incredible.
Yep, that'd be really cool as a general thing. But if you're using Blaze, I would definitely check it out. Yeah,
if you're using Blaze, super check out this reval project that will let you like edit your website literally instantly. Yeah.
And it looks to be early days, so if you have any issues or anything that you can improve with it, you should probably get your hands dirty there and help out.
Yep.
Cool. Well, we are getting short on time, but I just wanted to touch on Kadira Meteor APM, Kadira / now called Meteor APM.
That's right.
So the new Galaxy Professional with Meteor APM came out, which is awesome. And Kadira is open, has been open sourced. So I think that's cool. I mean, I guess maybe it's sad to see a service go, but I'm glad that MDG picked it up and made it still available. And
yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And there are people talking about restoring Kadira, the open source version, still or running it as a SaaS service again, so that you might be able to use the old one, but not not have to install it yourself. So do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know how hard it is. I think it's definitely a bit harder than people think to operate a SaaS product based on someone else's code. Because people ask us this question, they're like, why don't you just take all the Kadira stuff and then just run the same service as before? And somebody actually had a really funny comment. It's funny in like an ironic way, I guess, where they were like, oh, well, maybe because you didn't actually write the code, you could run Kadira for even cheaper than it cost before. But I think it's definitely not the case. You can see that if the Kadira product made a sufficient amount of money to continue operating, it would. So whoever is running that Kadira SaaS product based on that open source release, I would really encourage you to think about your pricing model in a way that allows you to remain open for a while. Because the worst thing for people using Kadira is if the service doesn't continue running. And I think, people have sometimes unrealistic expectations of what services like that should cost. But even just operating it and making sure it stays up and making sure it's reliable is a lot of work. And that's actually the main reason, as far as I understand, that we chose to fold that into a single Galaxy Pro product. Because operationally, running two separate products is almost twice as much work as running one product that has a couple of extra features. But it's great. People are having a great time upgrading Galaxy Pro. I really hope that people are figuring out how to run Kadira in a standalone way as well, because I understand not everyone can buy Galaxy, and that's okay. I mean, we don't want to make it hard to run Meteor somewhere else. So I would be super happy to see a service come out that lets people have the Kadira that they've always had. And I will happily promote that product for you as soon as it launches.
And there is a guide to self-hosting Kadira too. So there's a thread on that. So if you search for that in the Meteor forums, you should find it. It doesn't look trivial, but yeah, it can be done, and there's a guide for it. So there you go.
Yeah. There's definitely a couple of different services that are involved. So
okay.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind to touch on one more thing if we have another minute. There's a highly upvoted open issue that's been brought up on the thread, the announcement thread for this, about source maps support for Meteor in production.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any thoughts about that? Is there anything that you know of that would be blocking this, or what do you think is the future for this? I
think the problem with source maps is that they are, super, super, super slow to generate, right? Like, I think the two things that make Meteor, some of the two things that make Meteor feel slower than it has to be is minification and source maps. So I think, that's one of the reasons why this is not in there yet. But I think, people should really look at this, and I'm definitely going to make sure that we have some way of keeping track of what the most desired features and issues are. I think one thing we've been focusing on the most for the issues is just making sure to clean out a lot of the old junk that we had. We finally got a couple of people who are interested in triaging issues and helping prioritize stuff. And so we've managed to get the issues down to under 600, which is down from I think perhaps even several thousand.
Awesome.
So I think now that we've cleaned out all that stuff, focusing on issues like this is something we should do soon. So unfortunately, I don't have a super great answer for why we haven't worked on this already, but I will find it.
Cool. Okay. All right. Well, is there anything else that I should have touched on but missed that you noticed?
No. I'm really excited to see other people get more excited about Meteor, because I think a new Meteor release is always a great chance to do that. And yeah, like I said before, converting that excitement into some contributions. Like, for example, one of the things that I'm really interested in is making the smallest Meteor app you can build even smaller, right? So if you find something that seems like an extra dependency or extra weight, we've created this new flag called Meteor create dash dash bear. And our intention is that that's going to be, almost zero code size, so that you can use it as the base of an application and not feel like you're bringing in a whole framework along with that, and you can add back just the stuff that you want. So figuring out how to remove unnecessary stuff that's just like around for the heck of it, like jQuery was a great example of this in the past, would be really cool as well.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Well, if anyone has feedback for us, feel free to post it on the announcement thread for this show, or give it to me directly via the forums, or however you like. It'd be much appreciated. And Sashko, thanks again as always for doing this.
Thank you, Paul.
Okay, thanks.